And this is recorded, just like it just said. So, keep in mind that if you share something, keep like the school name or identifiable information out just to keep everybody safe. All right. Well, thank you, thank you, thank you for being here. Let's jump in. And you're seeing it from the back. So we'll start here. How about that? Okay. I know this is a little bit of a silly title, but we wanted to go with the theme. Teachers and executive function coaches love themes. So we're talking about what the ghosts of grades past can teach you, but really it's just a way to make school easier and get better grades. So that's what we're doing. We're unlocking some thinking tonight. And this is a way to find what works and ditch what doesn't work. So that's what grade autopsies are all about. I am Sarah Kesty. I host the Executive Function Podcast and the IEP OMG show. Those of you who don't know necessarily, IEPs are the paperwork for getting services and accommodations at school. There's also 504 plans, which are similar, but kind of under a different category of law that would also provide accommodations. And both of them help when your kid has executive dysfunction. So if you have questions on that, that's definitely a later question. You can just email me those, but that's what the IEP OMG show is all about. And then I am the CEO of Brain Tools Coaching, where I coach individuals and families. And then more broadly, I train schools and school districts on executive function. I know, it's wild. It's my dream job. And I'm so, so, so thankful for it. And I'm so thankful for people like you who are here. And Angela has a very impressive technology background. So do you want to speak a little bit to that?
So I am a third grade teacher, veteran elementary teacher. And as education progressed with technology, and I knew that my students needed to build skills to be successful in school, I also started working on my own personal professional growth by learning a lot about different technology tools that can help support my students in the classroom. And so I wasn't expecting this, but yes, these are a lot of the areas that I have focused on for myself, as well as to help my young learners be successful, not only in elementary, but that they can carry those skills throughout their learning career. So yeah.
It's awesome. And I'm really leaning on her for assistive technology ideas. So different ways to kind of level the playing field when you have executive function deficits. How can you kind of augment them with technology? I think she'd be an amazing assistive tech expert. So we'll see. Second career. All right. So that's us. So we're worth listening to. We know some stuff, especially about school. Tonight, I'm speaking to students and to your lovely grown-ups. So to everyone, I offer this because it's the evening, no matter what time zone you're in, if you're in America, and it is a tired Thursday. Yeah. Like end of October tired. We get it. So first thing I'm going to ask of you is to think about the energy you're bringing. And there's no judgment, there's no right or wrong energy. But as you think about that, think about what can I do to bring my energy into the level it's best for learning. And for some people, that's more engaged and kind of up. For some people, it's bringing your energy down so you can focus. It's very personal, but take some time and experiment during this fun time together. You're still learning, but it's also a strategy playground opportunity where you get to think about, I kind of need some more energy. What can I do? Or I'm really pumped after my soccer game. How can I come down so that I can be here in my brain? Either way, whoops, but it's your opportunity to experiment. So stand up, get a drink, whatever you need to do to manage your brain. You will need something to write with and write on. So if you don't have that already, go grab it. If you're watching the replay, watch the whole thing. It's worth it. And even if you need to stop in the middle and then schedule it with a reminder so that you come back and do it, please do. Absolutely worth it. And you showed up either on recording or in person to see it. So bring it on. And then the very last thing, we've talked about this before. If you've joined me for previous webinars, you have this cool feature in your brain that cleans up the excess, that cleans up kind of the things that you learned that you don't really need to remember, like the color shirt somebody had on, or some weird fact that really isn't going to impact your future. Your brain has functionally like brain janitors. It's called the limbic system that goes through and just kind of clears out the junk at night. Well, here's the thing. Sometimes your brain doesn't know the difference between junk and something you really want to remember or something that like you need to remember for school. So one way to kind of instruct the brain janitors is to think about it right before you go to sleep. So to review, to have some time to talk about it, to just, I mean, and it doesn't even have to be long, maybe a couple of minutes of just look over your notes. Okay, got it. And what that does is it gives you another exposure. So that's another chance to move it to short or long-term memory. But it also cues your brain janitors to say, that's important, don't erase it. Or, oh, that fact matters, don't throw it away. So tonight, I would challenge you to think about, what did I learn in grade autopsies and what's my plan? And it can be playful. It doesn't have to be like boring, sit down and reread or rewatch the webinar. Just give it some thinks. And you know what? I thought that my captions were on, and usually they are. So I'm going to take a minute to put them on because I know that can kind of help. So below slide, are you guys seeing it? It says that they're on, but I'm not seeing it. No? Good gravy. Is it one of those tech nights where you see the real me? I apologize, everybody. Okay. Do you know where subtitle settings?
I know, I'm looking right now too.
Bottom overlaid. All right, we're gonna give that a try. And then if not, maybe I can just modify it later. That's so weird. What a bummer. That's why I use PowerPoint, because Google Slides won't do it. Okay. Sorry, everybody, if you're depending on captions, I really apologize. That's usually my default. It is my default. I don't know why it's not working, but we'll figure it out. Okay. So tonight, what are we going to do? We're going to talk about what is a grade autopsy. Why would you want to do one? Because hello, Sarah, pause. If I'm already behind, why would I want to do extra work, right? I'll convince you. How do you do a grade autopsy? And then generally some great ideas and your plan to take this from knowledge in your brain to action in your life. So we're going to make sure that this isn't just something like, cool, she was kind of weird, I learned some stuff. No, I want this to change your life in ways that feel powerful, because that is why you're spending your time with us tonight. So we'll figure that out as well. Did you figure out the captions, what I'm doing wrong? No.
No, I can't. Not on my end. It might be.
Oh,
might
it's
be your end.
probably my end, but yeah.
Yeah, sorry.
No, it's all right. How frustrating though, because I really value being accessible and thinking about that. And then here we are with no captions. Apologies again, my friends. I'll figure out a way to make it better. Learn from this. Okay. So what is a grade autopsy? It's kind of silly, and outside of Halloween time, you might just call it a review. If you're okay with calling it an autopsy, great. When we lost a chicken a couple months ago, we didn't know why she had passed away. If we had sent her to the place to have her body examined and kind of figure out why she passed away, that would be a necropsy, not an autopsy. Fun fact. There you go. It's Halloween. But the idea is you're looking back at something with the lens of there's something to learn from this. So when people have autopsies done on their bodies after they've passed away, it's to figure out what caused their death. When we do a grade autopsy, it's to figure out a couple of things. It's to help make you a smarter player in the game of school. And it's not always for bad grades. So it's not figuring out why a grade died per se. It could be figuring out, oh my gosh, what went right? That was really easy, or that wasn't nearly as bad as I thought it would be. And just offering your brain the chance to figure out what works in this game of school. Because what we know is when you play a video game, every time you die or lose points or lose lives in the video game, you're learning and you're like, ooh, not doing that again. Or you're like, oh, that was such a cool feature I saw from someone else. I'm going to jump over that thing. Clearly, I don't game very much, but you get the idea. We can do the same thing for school. We can look at, okay, what's going right, what's going a little bit wonky. And next time I do this level at school, like a test or an essay, how can I bring what I learned and play the game a little bit better? And a bonus of doing it this way is it helps your brain feel excited and problem solvy rather than feeling like, oh, I can't do school. School's so hard. And that's not to take away that school's easy. School is hard for a lot of brains. But if you can kind of make it a game where you're like figuring it out, oh man, your brain's gonna be like, thank you. And things will feel a lot smoother. So you can think of grade autopsies in many different ways, like the video game analysis, the analogy that I just gave. You could think of it like watching a replay video, like a sports game, and you're like, whoa, he fumbled. What happened? Oh, look, he twisted his ankle and that made him drop the ball, or whatever it is, and kind of figure out what went right or wrong in a play. We could do that for school too. It also teaches your brain how you learn best and how you can get to the next level. So better grades with less effort. That's what grade autopsies can do. So are you a little bit convinced now that you're watching it, or you're like, maybe it's worth it, Sarah? I'm kind of listening. If you're a teenager, maybe like your head's turned from all the way away to kind of like side-eyeing me. I get it. It's cool. I'm going to win you over. Watch. Okay. So what do grade autopsies look at? We look at the big picture. We look at the small picture, like the individual assignments. We look at what the teachers have said. And we look at your experience. What was it like being you and studenting in that situation? And I'm going to say that you get to choose what you make your teacher feedback mean to you. Here's what I mean. I've had bosses in my life that have told me that I'm not good at a certain thing, or I really need to work on a certain skill. And then the next year I get an award or something for the very same skill that one boss said I was bad at. You get to pick kind of what you take from other people's feedback, and you get to decide, is this who I want to be, or do I want to challenge this and think about it in a way that makes me grow? Okay. So teacher feedback matters if you're seeing some patterns, but it also isn't always fact. It may just be what they see from their perspective. All right. So those are grade autopsies. And remember, if there's anything unclear, please speak up. Here's a kind of goofy graphic, but the idea is good. Why would you perform a grade autopsy? So here's the truth. Grade autopsies take a couple minutes. And when you're already feeling like, oh my gosh, you should see the list of missing work. I have midterms or tests coming up, or like I'm always behind on homework, whatever it is, whatever the flavor of stress is right now. We've all kind of got that. Why on earth would you be like, yeah, come here, give me something else to do? Okay, here's why. You can think of grade autopsies as finding the vampires that are sucking out your points. So every single one of us has weak spots or things that we're missing or things that we're not naturally noticing. And when you take a look back at your grades, when you do a grade autopsy, it helps you see where your points are kind of dripping out, where they're hemorrhaging, where you're just losing points that could be pretty easy to keep. It makes getting good grades easier to look back and figure out what's going on. It also frees up your time. So yes, it takes a couple minutes right now, but next week you is going to be feeling better, and the week after you is going to have better grades, and the week after you is going to be like, whoa, I like this is very different. Studenting feels better. So hoping that you're getting convinced. I'm going to do that. Oh, Angela, it always does that where it puts your face. That's so funny. All right.
What?
When I minimize my Zoom, can you guys see when I minimize it to this?
No, no.
Can you only see the screen right now, not me at all?
I can see you for myself. I can see the screen and you next to it.
Oh, well, all right, then I'm good. I'm gonna rock and roll. Okay, so we talked about what grade autopsies are. They're just looking back, just taking a sneak peek, seeing what went right, what went wonky, and what do the ghosts of grades past have to teach you. Okay. Now we're going to think about how to do a grade autopsy. And I made it super simple in a acronym, which acronyms just fancy word for like each letter represents a full word. So our acronym is GAP, GAP. And then if we think about it, GAP, G stands for A, stands for P, stands for, I'll tell you in a second. But the idea is those could be three separate things to memorize. But when we put them together as GAP, you only have to remember one thing, even though when you think about it, you can separate it into three. So that's a memory hack called chunking, or, making a, why did I lose the word? GAP acronym. There we go. I'm functioning with a pretty significant headache. Sorry, guys. Okay. So, GAP. How do you do a brain autopsy? You gather, you ask, and you plan. Remember GAP? How it would separate out? Now you only have one thing to remember, but it represents the three steps of gather all your stuff, all of it, ask some pretty good questions, which we've designed for you, and then make a plan. What are you going to do? And by the way, part of your plan is what are you going to stop doing or not worry about? So parents, don't freak out, but there are some assignments that are okay to skip. And if you think about it, parents, there are probably some spots in our lives where we know where we can drop a ball or two and be okay. Like my kitchen floor gets swept a couple times a week, and that's pretty okay. Like if you can feel the grit, I'm going to sweep, but otherwise I got kids to help, right? Like we know what balls we can drop in our life kind of by trial and error. Our kids can learn that same executive function of prioritizing by planning through this process. So here's the tricky part, my darlings. When you gather everything for your grade autopsy, that means taking all of your grades, all of your papers, like you might go through your backpack, just gather everything. And I would actually recommend, if you have like an online grading system like Q or Gradebook or Blackboard or Canvas or Jupyter Grades or Google Classroom, whatever it is, print it out. I know we want to save trees, recycle it when you're done, but print it out, because if you're going back and forth between tabs, it's really, really hard on your brain. So the first step with Gather, print your stuff. You'll have it. And not just the big one page that says math, A, science, C, PE, B, like the details of each assignment. Anything that is already graded or online, you can put in as well. You're going to grab a calendar, and I'm going to tell you why. So a calendar that has some of the main events that you've had in your life recently, you'll have that as well. And then you're going to make an empty space to you, next to you, either metaphorically or really, because this is uncomfortable. So we're going to say right off the bat, it's okay to make space next to you, to have some shame, some fear, some overwhelm, maybe some joy, some pride. It's going to be very mixed with your feelings, because your whole life so far, school has been your job. And if you're here with me tonight, chances are you're very, very smart, and studenting is pretty tricky. And that's a really hard spot to be in. And probably you've heard from at least a couple teachers, why don't you just, or you should, and things like that can make you feel kind of shameful. So when we have that, and oops, by the way, I recognize I spelled emotions wrong. Sorry. When we have that, our brains tend to go into protecting us. And when that happens, when our brains protect us, they tell us, stay away, that's scary, don't do it. And so you'll notice when you're starting to gather your grades, your brain might be like, okay, I'll gather my English grade because I did fine, but I'm not even looking at math. Or I'll gather my math stuff because I did pretty well, but nope, I'm not going to touch science because I didn't do well. It's okay to make space for all of it. And I encourage you to think of it this way. What if the toughest class ended up being the level of studenting game that taught you how to play the game better for all classes? What if there was like that one thing you were missing in science that when you went and it clicked in your brain, then, oh my gosh, I get it now. I can do this. So there is opportunity when looking back at scary things, but you're absolutely justified, and it makes sense if you're feeling kind of like, I don't want to look. I don't even want to look, like that's in the past. I need to move forward. So it's okay to make space for that. Parents, this is for you. I absolutely encourage you to be very free through this process. And if you don't think you can, which is okay, like own it, find like a helpful auntie or uncle or mentor or neighbor who can walk your kid through this. Don't risk the relationship tension and the judgment and kind of putting some bad flavor to this. It really needs to be neutral. So, and a lot of you are excellent at this, just kind of asking curious questions. But if you recognize some shoulds or some why don't you just kind of coming out of your face, maybe this is a spot where you kind of lean on somebody else. And what we're providing you tonight with like the handouts and stuff is very doable for anybody. So it doesn't have to be you that does it with your kid, which is also kind of nice. So, and then another thing, if you wanted to sort of pre-handle the overwhelm and address some of that before you get into it, is to just practice a brain dump where you just write down anything that's on your mind, anything goes, just get it out, where then you can see it all, kind of honor it, maybe think about it, maybe not, maybe just throw it away, but just kind of clear your head space before you get into it. What are you wondering or thinking as we talk about step one, which is gather? What are you wondering? Oh, Ange, I think you're going to host and panelists only.
I said, oh no, thank you.
Oh,
Uh-oh.
no, you're welcome. Okay, so I think
Oh, because I can't. Hold on. Let's see. No, I don't have the option to message attendees.
oh, that's fun. Way to go, Sarah. All right. Yeah, thanks, Meg, for the no. I'm bummed about the captions. I'm sorry, guys. Well, this is very human of me. I'm just going to copy and paste what Angela put in there. So give me just a moment. So we've got the resources for tonight on that Wakelet that I just posted. We've got the Join Team Kesty available for all the updates and things like that. And the Wakelet link that I just posted, the very first one, would be the most important. So attendees can chat with everyone. I just switched it, and you're good.
Okay.
I heard you sigh when you said that. Boy, is it one of those nights. I apologize. But also, I'm not sorry for having human moments. I'm sorry that it's slowing us down. But kids who are watching, teenagers, college students who are watching, like, I'm definitely an expert and I've done this a million times and I'm still having tech issues because I'm a human. And yes, I'm noticing some like stress signs in my body, but I'm going to regulate. I'm going to keep pushing forward. It takes a lot of practice to get to the level where you can do this, but I want you to know that it happens to everybody at some point. Some people more often than others, but we all have those struggles. Okay. The chat's going wild.
Yeah, now it is. Okay. Okay, so it says, is it most helpful to do this for each and every class? Gather separately for math, reading, science, etc., or gather and look at all of it collectively?
Ooh, I'm going to offer that there is no most helpful. It's very much going to depend on what works for your brain. So I think big picture wise, kind of looking for patterns, it can help to zoom out and see all classes. But what you might find is the patterns of energy or focus depend more on time of day than content, or that maybe the strategies worked in one class, not because of the content, but because of the teacher. So open your mind up to like exploring different Zooms of really zoomed into one assignment, maybe like writing assignments, or looking at like week by week. When do I do like really poorly on Mondays? What's up with that? Or, year by year, lots of different ways to look at it. But I don't necessarily think that there's any one right or wrong way to do it. It's all about learning your process. And I can also offer that if it is kind of overwhelming, start with one class. Start with one class that's kind of a representative sample of like kind of hard, kind of easy, and see what you can glean from that. And then try the process again with another. When do you recommend separately for sure? Yeah. Awesome. Thank you all for that. Okay. Perfect. I appreciate the questions. Okay. So we're going to move into ask. So we've got gather. You're just collecting everything. We're going to move into ask. And part of why I wanted gather to be the first step is often we just jump in and we only look at part. I want to give your brain the opportunity to make sure that you're taking everything, because what we know about students who have struggled a bit is you already kind of have what's called cognitive bias, and your brain is looking for evidence for why studenting is hard and why you're a bad student. And so, and not to say that you are, but sometimes your brain kind of starts to believe that. And so if you don't take the time to gather all of the things, your brain might only let you focus on the bad things and that wouldn't be the true picture. So taking some time to gather everything ahead of time ends up showing you all of it, which can be a mix of good and tricky. Okay, so now we're in the ask. Here are some questions, and you don't need to memorize these because they're in your resources. But here are a few questions that you can ask yourself. You could ask a partner if you were doing this together. You could have a trusted grown up ask you. Um, if you wanted to have these printed out and just kind of have them as like a guide, you could. Again, there's a whole menu of ways to do this. But the idea is you're asking not yes or no questions, not like kind of single answer questions, really big questions that can be answered in so many different ways. And there's no right or wrong answer. Okay, so as you look through these, this helps you find the patterns. And again, just like in a video game, helps you play better so that you can keep leveling up. One thing I will tell you as you kind of look over these questions is thinking costs glucose, which is an energy source in your body, and your brain is very protective of that. So, oftentimes, if something's uncomfortable or feels like it's going to take a lot of thought, your brain might be like, no, thank you. All of a sudden, I really need to clean my room. Or all of a sudden, I just don't feel good. I can't do this. Okay. You might even notice some like overwhelmed signs of getting hot or tense as you start asking these questions. That's super normal as well, because sometimes this does touch on some things that are pretty emotional. And that's okay. You're not doing anything wrong if this is uncomfortable, but it's so worth it. I also have a strategy for you if your brain starts saying, um, I don't know. So oftentimes your brain will say, I don't know, just immediately, because for the most part, if you say, I don't know, either grown-ups are going to ask you again and you get more think time, or they're going to kind of start feeding you the answer like, well, if you did know, would it be this? And then you're like, yeah, that's it. Right? Like your brain's kind of learned to say, I don't know, as a coping mechanism to kind of get through. And sometimes you legitimately don't know at first. But with these questions, chances are your brain does have some ideas. And it's very common for your brain to go, I don't know, again, to kind of protect yourself. So, couple ways around that. If your brain says, I don't know, ask it, okay, if you did know, what would you say? Sometimes, guys, your brain will go, oh, well, I would say, and you're like, okay, so you did know. What's up with that? I do it to my brain all the time. It's magic. Or if your brain says, I don't know, you can say, dig deep, or I'll give you a sec, just like a teacher might do to you. And that lets your brain know, like, yo, you're safe. I'm going to wait right here. Let's think about it. Okay. So as you kind of think of these things, yeah, your brain might push back a little bit because, I mean, when I do this, like with my coaching business, where are the spots where I could be better for my clients? That makes me feel some shame because shouldn't I always be great? Right. But also, I'm also always growing. And so I have to use these tools with my own brain too to look back and keep growing as a human. And I do notice some discomfort. I do notice some avoidance and procrastination, all the things that happen with students as well. But it's worth it because then you're able to play the game better. And Angela was posting in the chat, are there other questions that you kind of tend to ask after you get a grade that may be helpful? You can add those to the chat as well. And while you think, oopsie, I'm going to go back and remind us where we are. So Gather all of your grades, all of the evidence that you've collected, good and tricky, great grades and not so great grades, all of it. And then you're going to ask those really thoughtful questions about what you're learning about you through this process. And then the cool part is the plan. So I'll show you that. You get to plan, and I have this all outlined for you. So again, you don't have to memorize it. But the idea is, okay, now what? I looked back at my grades and I thought, what was really, really effective? What was a total waste of time? Where were those like vampire point stealers that I can like pretty easily address? And what do I plan to do with this information now? And this is where we take knowing something and turning it into doing something so that it's actually effective, so that it actually helps you have a better student experience starting next week. So your plan could sound like, I will keep doing, I will stop doing. One strategy I haven't thought of, but seems like it could be cool. And you will end up putting all of these strategies into your calendar, onto a list, things like that, that will help your brain know what you learned and not forget it. So gather, ask, and plan. But first, I want to show you some real life examples. So these are real life, wonderful humans that I know who have some grades. And I wanted to show you what it would look like kind of in the ask/plan zone of this process. So this is an 8th grader who has some things that they might want to look at. So right away, we noticed when we were looking at this, there are out of the 10 points possible, this student got a 6 on 2 different assignments. One question this student might ask is, what was happening those weeks? And that would be why you have your calendar to look back. Because you could look at the 6 and be like, oh man, I did terrible. I'm such a bad student. Or you could look at the 6 and say, man, I'm so glad I even got a 6 because that was the week that my dog passed away. Or, oh, I remember on assignment 10, I had a really bad cold and I was super sick and I just did my very best. Or you could remember back and be like, man, I didn't get it. That was a really hard assignment for me. Again, there's no right or wrong answer, but the idea is we're thinking about kind of detective work of why these grades happened, curiously, with no judgment, but looking and saying like, I lost 8 points total those 2 times, and I don't love losing points. So what was it? And if the answer is, oh, I didn't get it, maybe that leads you to strategies of, okay, well, when I don't understand something, where can I go for help? Or if the answer was, well, that was the week that my dog passed away and I was just really having a hard time, maybe that's when you recognize, okay, some assignments are going to be like that. I'm not going to do so hot, and that is absolutely fine. I can still love me because I am doing my best. So do you see how this can teach you, but doesn't need to make you feel any certain way? Another one of my favorite questions to ask is what went right? So this student had 100 out of 100, a perfect score on a test. What went right? And then when they identify what went right, then they can say, okay, how can I repeat that? It's like when you get through a level on a video game really fast and you're like, whoa, how did that happen? How did I do so well? But then you take those same strategies like, oh, well, I was kind of holding the, um, oh my gosh, I never play video games. The controller, is that what we still call it? I was holding the controller a certain way, or I was sitting right here and I could see the TV better, whatever it is. The idea is you're thinking of what works so that you can capture it and stick it in your toolbox rather than just having it be some like loosey floaty thing of like, oh yeah, I remember I did okay on that test and that's it. Remember when I started the webinar and said the ghosts of grades past have things to teach you. It's not all bad. Sometimes they're teaching you like that, do that again. That works. Okay, let me know what questions are kind of coming up in your mind, and I'm going to move on to our next example. Okay, so take a second to feel the like, whoa, this is a little bit overwhelming, yeah? But there's spots in here that we can grow from. And here's a couple things. So first, I put an arrow, and this is why I asked you to print your stuff, because writing on it can really be helpful. So I digitally wrote on it, but writing can be helpful too. Look at how cool this is like a map to a good grade. The teachers at the school show how much of the grade is each section. So if you look, practice is only 25%, but major assignments are worth 40, almost half. So if I was a student who was thinking about, I'm really overwhelmed, where do I put my effort? This helps me decide, because if I think of my points like money, I want the 40 bucks, not the 25. So that's one spot here. And I see the chat, I'll be right there. The other spot is, check this out. This student had originally a 54 on a test, and then they took it over and got a 70. That means that retaking the tests is worth it, and that's going right. So this student can take that strategy and think, got it. This is something I can do in this class, and it works. Like, that's 16 extra points. Very, very worth it. All right, and I'll head over, but please let us know what questions you got. Okay, here's another overwhelming one. So take a second and go, oh, wooga. I have worse examples, by the way. As a student with executive dysfunction, this might break your brain a little bit. Like, it's a lot. And although teachers are trying to be helpful with a lot of information, sometimes it can feel overwhelming. So again, if that's the case, there are always strategies, including covering up some of it so that your eyes only see part of it. Maybe printing it out so it's not so big on the screen, taking it in little chunks, lots of different ways, okay? But I wanted to show you what an ask and kind of a plan could look like based on this. So this is the same student from before, the screen just before. In this class, this student feels pretty overwhelmed. And when they looked at the daily work, they noticed, oh, whoa, this is really dragging my grade down. Like, it's my lowest average. And so their question for themselves is, how can I get better at these? And it's not a shameful thing of like, why am I so bad at these? It's like, all right, I keep getting out of the game in this level, or the guy jumps out and scares me and then my character's dead in the game. I'm terrible at video game analogies. I should probably learn these if I'm going to try to use them. But the idea is, you know what? I'm recognizing a pattern. What can I do with this? And then so that's the ask part, kind of figuring out your brain. An additional part would be, okay, where am I going to put my effort? If I have the chance to make up some of these assignments, what's worth it and what's going to go on my not worth it list? I remember I told you that doing this would save you time. This is why. The not worth it list helps you know, even if I do that, it's not going to bump my grade up enough to be like impactful. I'm not going to do it. I'm going to skip it on purpose. And it's not a character flaw. It's not a morality issue. It's not because you don't care about school. It's because you're playing smart. And look at that. That whole assignment is worth like 0.25 of a percent of the grade. No, thanks. I don't want to do it. And that's okay. Absolutely fine. Once in a while to pick what you will skip on purpose because it's not a big deal for your grade. And especially right now, as you're kind of coming up towards midterms, end of the semester, or end of the grading term, you're going to have to make tough choices like that. And it's again, it's not because you're a bad student or you're stupid or anything like that. It's because it's too much to handle at this point, and you get to choose what comes off of your plate. Tiny tickle in my throat. Sorry. Okay. This one's a little fuzzy, so pardon that. Again, you can see where there's a whole bunch of details, a whole bunch of assignments. This could feel pretty overwhelming to your brain. So again, you can cross it off, or you can cover it up and kind of look bit by bit. You could maybe take some of the data off the sides and just see the work. But once you look at it, you kind of notice a pattern. And there's a pattern of lots of 5-pointers and then some bigger point assignments. When you're looking at this and you're looking, okay, I missed a couple of homeworks, but not too bad. One of them I got a 1 out of 5. When you have a lot of small point assignments, you get to think about, okay, if I do skip 1 or 2, it probably won't hurt my grade. But in something like math, if I plan to skip a whole bunch, the points will start to add up. And what if that is actually practice for the test? So this would be a question for you. How much do the homeworks match the test? Do the homeworks really get me ready for the test? Are they kind of like far off from the test and not that helpful? Just a question to think about when you're deciding how you're going to meter your energy. And a lot of the times parents, just so you're aware, if you kind of look, I know it's kind of fuzzy, but it says Delta Math and then it says lesson like 3.2 or something like that. Delta Math is a program on a computer, which can be super helpful for skills because it's like, it's paced based on student accuracy. So it'll give you another question to practice if you can't get something. So it can be very helpful. But as far as being closely related to the tests, generally the math homeworks or the things that are part of the math curriculum are more beneficial. So if your child's in between a rock and a hard place of like, I'm really stressed, I don't know what to do, I'd say go for the things that are more test prep, like the homework, like the teacher created materials, like the review questions and things like that. And the programs can wait until maybe the weekend or, sorry, kids, or, over a break where they can kind of have some time to catch up. What are your thoughts, Angela, as we kind of plow through a couple examples?
I think and I'm just thinking when I see things like this, we use Google Classroom. So the assignments are piled on like this, listed. And it's overwhelming at first, like you said, for sure. So that's the piece I think that needs to first be processed, because sometimes just the overwhelming of looking at all the assignments. But if you, like you said, when you do the gather piece and you have them in front of you, I think that lessens it. And sometimes it's hard, 'cause like you said, if things are going digital, definitely print them. Because what you can also do is if you have like a syllabus, and I'm guessing for secondary, middle school, and high school, and this is printed, if you're collecting that gathering data, prior to the autopsy, you can kind of like make it less stressful and overwhelming by checking things off as you go, right? Like, and then when you're looking, and this is what I was thinking, if I were to see, okay, I have this quiz coming up that I probably don't need to do, but if I've been kind of checking those previous scores coming to that, I think for myself, and I'm just thinking as a person who, always did all of it, I can't imagine not doing one, right? But if I saw that I had all my scores in and it kind of gave me that okay to skip that one coming up, like you said, but planning ahead, like to me, like having that plan ahead to, you know, because then in your brain, you can accept the fact like, okay, this one's kind of like a no-go. I don't need it, but I feel good about what I've previously have. And then you can move forward from there. So that's what I was kind of, when I was looking at this, I was like, wow, this is, if I planned like this back when I was in middle school or high school, right? Like it definitely would have relieved a lot of stress for myself taking assessments. Yeah.
Right. Well, and especially like if you know, like, because if you're overwhelmed and you're running out of time, you will drop a ball at some point. You will not get something turned in. And this empowers you to pick what you don't turn in so it doesn't hurt your grade. But if you don't do this, life will pick for you, and that could end up being a really big assignment. So this lets you be the boss of what you kind of say no thanks to. And we have some really easy tools to make your choice way more easy. Way more easy. It's sad that I taught English for a little bit.
Yeah, but well, I was also thinking like when you said not only does it make it easy, but then you start to feel like you gain control over it, right? Like you start to feel like you are in the driver's seat or the person behind the controller, and then you feel that okay, I can make these choices for myself, which will help me feel better about that. And then I was even thinking, when you have a plan like this leading into, like, if you decide to go to college, right? Because a lot of those grades are weighted. Now you kind of know like how to kind of plan which assignments or what tests or quizzes will be important to you. And that was, I think for me, going from high school to college during that time, that was the most challenging because
Yeah,
you,
that makes so much
right?
sense.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, and I have a couple of college examples coming up, so that's good timing. This is an 8th grade example. Actually, the previous 3 have been 8th grade examples, but and you can see from the 8th grade examples how teachers vary widely, right? Like this is just like you can see the pattern in this class too, right? It's like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 assignments, and then a quiz, and then a test, and then 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 assignments, and then a quiz. It's pretty patterned. And that gives you information to say, okay, if I'm noticing this pattern, I can predict when my tests will be. And then that helps me decide when it's okay to maybe like get some extra sleep or have an extra snack or when I need to start studying, that kind of thing too. So just like you were saying, Angela, it really makes it powerful to be on the planning end rather than the reacting end. And even though we're in the middle of the year, you can get your control back. And that helps so much with overwhelm. And okay, I will speak to the ditching aspect in a bit. So if you're a student who's like, I can't not do something, like, trust me, Angela and I are with you because we feel the same way, especially as a student. I was a ball of nervous energy all the time, but I'm going to teach you how to process through that and how to identify what's okay. So we'll get there. Okay. Here's an example of exactly what Angela was just talking about. This teacher values tests a lot. And that's not good or bad, right or wrong. It just is the math teacher that this student has. 70% of the grade comes from tests. This is the class for which if I had an assignment and I couldn't hang with like either doing the work or studying. If I had to pick one, oh boy, I know I'm going to pick studying because that is over half of my grade comes from my tests. Yeah, definitely. Angela just put in the chat, knowing what teachers weigh is part of the game. So, well, not teacher personal weight, but knowing what teachers value.
Right.
Don't ask your teacher what she weighs or how old she is or if she's pregnant. Those are the threes. Don't touch them. Nope. Nope. Oh my goodness. We have devolved into silliness, have we? Okay. Here's an example from elementary school. And I really appreciate the mom who shared this with me, shared a little bit of the journey too. So we have that as well. But some questions that this student could ask, and this is the end of the year report card from last year. She she may ask herself, what patterns do I see? And she might see that first and second semester or trimester pretty much match. She might see some patterns in like missing work, missing work, missing work in the feedback. Then she might notice some changes. So she might say, it looks like getting work turned in was getting harder because if you notice, she goes from needs improvement, which is kind of above, and then unsatisfactory, which means like not meeting the teacher's expectations in almost all of the third trimester feedback. So she could say, and this is where you get curious, not judgmental. She could say, oof, look at my third trimester. Like that was really tough. Why? And then sometimes the answers will just start coming out. Well, I was really sad about something that happened in my family, or I was just plain out of energy. Nothing I was doing was working, and I was feeling give uppy. Or, well, that was the time when we moved into group work and I was really having a hard time in groups. Tons of reasons why. And it's not a studenting fail, it's not a character. It's just to say, okay, these things were happening and they weren't so hot for me. Now, where do I go from here? So, parents, I would also let you know that having patterns like this is not something to kind of be like, oh, well, I guess my kids fill in the blank, whatever kind of character assessment. Here's the deal. Kids who put their butts in seats at school or kids who walk their feet into the school building care. Just fact. They may show up in very apathetic costumes of, well, that's, I don't care, like schools, but they're there. They're showing up. Sometimes they act disengaged because that's way easier mentally than showing up and being vulnerable and saying, I don't know why this is so hard for me. I'm really frustrated with my brain. And they may not even have that self awareness built up just yet, but we've got to function from the assumption that they care. They do. They're at school. With that assumption, now we have to look at, okay, if they care and we're still seeing this kind of feedback, then something's wrong. Something's going on. And that's not something's wrong with the kid. That's something's wrong with, I wonder what kind of things might be going on with their learning differences or could be going on with helping them with maybe a resource on campus, a 504, an IEP. Those kind of patterns, if it's happening year after year, semester after semester, are indicative of we got to take it to next level to get some help. And I apologize. I definitely had parent permission to share this, but I didn't realize that the blocking things moved over. So I apologize for that. What are you wondering from this? Okay. And while you think, I want to just make the invisible visible. You parents and participants are going through the same school energy roller coaster as your kids, because Angela can testify, right? Like the first webinar, oh my gosh, people would not stop talking. The second one in September, lots of participation. And I'm not throwing shade on you, but now in October, you are crickets. And that's not because you're not wondering anything. It's because you are flippin' tired, right? And that's where your kids are too. It's I have a podcast episode on it too. It's this like you start and there's momentum and it's new and exciting. And then like, okay, September, but still. And then October, you're like, oh, the time's changing. It's getting cold. I'm tired. I'm overwhelmed. The holidays are coming. And you're here with us. Take some time to recognize that and be okay with it because it's very human of you. And then also say like, "Oh, I get it. This is where my kid is too." That's awesome. Yeah, October is a long month. It's funny when I said that, you guys were like, "Yep, yep." And it's true. I was having a hard time finding my words earlier, and I have a little bit of a headache because of the overwhelm as well. So, you guys, we're with you. Okay.
Plus, it's like that time right now where you're anticipating November and December. So like October is that like, and then like you said, we all had some sort of maybe conferences or first grades or so it's like, yeah, it's that time of year.
Well, and you know, like the cyclical nature of it, and you and I probably are guilty of this as well, Angela. It's like when I was teaching, I would just pour my heart into teaching so much so that like, yeah, I would grade things and I'd tell the kids their grades, but putting them online was a whole separate process. And usually what I did, and it was a practice that I was working on improving, but a lot of teachers do this. Usually what I did is I would wait until I had a whole bunch of grades and then put them all in at once, which then takes the online grading system from like, okay, my kid's doing okay to like, oh, holy cow, they're missing so much work. And nothing changed for the kid. It's just your awareness changed. And so that's cyclical too. Like you'll get batches of grade updates that really overwhelm you. So take a minute to sit back and be like, wait a minute. This isn't all new news. It's just new to me because I'm finally seeing it online, which I was always working on and never perfected. Human. Okay, I wanted to show you something really cool with this grade autopsy. And this is not actual work. This is just looking at what your teacher values. But this is another spot that you can like take some information because check this out. When I looked at this, my first gut reaction was like, whoa, I definitely, if points were money, I want to focus on the projects. And that is true, but it's not as simple as you think it is. And then I was like, okay, well, second best would be the online discussions. And then third would be the papers. Or I'm sorry, third would be the quizzes. And then last would be the reflection papers. But when I did the math on how many papers there were and how many counted for grades, I actually found out that each paper, discussion, and quiz was worth the same amount. Isn't that interesting? So if you notice up here, it says papers 1, 2, and 3, and the lowest will be dropped. So technically there's 2. 10 points split into 2 groups, 5 and 5. Those are 5% each. The discussions, there's 6. None of them are dropped. 30% split into 6 groups, 5 each. And then the quizzes, same thing. 4 quizzes, 20% split into 4, 5. Isn't that wild? So be careful and take your time to kind of look and say, okay, let me break this down to each one. Because like we said before, this gives you information on where am I going to put my biggest brain energy? Where am I going to get it done and turned in, but let it go, Elsa? where am I going to maybe even skip sometimes? Because within the paper and the projects, you do have some spots where you can own those human moments and give it your best, knowing that that score probably will be dropped. But that sure blew up my brain when I did the math on those. But that's another example of gathering everything, asking the questions, and then planning from there. Technology is not my friend today. Okay, take a minute to have the red ink reaction because it's a very visceral thing in most of our brains. And then I want to offer you this perspective. If we let our big emotional reaction take over and stop us from looking, it's akin to covering our eyes when somebody's trying to really show us something. And if we're brave enough to go like, ugh, this is overwhelming and I hate it. And also, what is my teacher telling me? You can find the trends. So when I looked at this quick example, I found that if I was the writer here, I would say, all right, I got to pay attention to commas, my use of whom. Maybe I would even Google, like, how do you use whom? And the quotes, because there was a whole bunch of spots where my teacher corrected my quotes. And then there were a couple good spots in here. Like my teacher was able to find the thesis really quickly and underline some things. And so my writing style is pretty solid. But one spot where the teacher did say was expand. Here's the deal. Because I know this, because I was brave enough to do an autopsy on this paper, next time I write it, I won't have those same problems. And yeah, maybe a few others will pop up, but maybe not. Learning from your past grades, even if it's scary and intense, helps you stop losing the game or stop getting kicked out of the level because you know what to do. And I'll tell you this, it's not an overnight fix. So even if you know what to do, actually doing the do is hard and it'll take some practice. But you'll get there way faster if you already have the map, which is why we're looking at our grades. I hope that you couldn't just hear my tummy. That was embarrassing. It's so hungry. Okay. All right, my loves, we have resources for you. So in the chat, we've put a couple of times the Wakelet, and I'm actually going to show you what it looks like. So when you pull up the Wakelet, Angela did an awesome job organizing it. We've got the webinar information up here and the PDF that has the dates to register or the links to register. We have one in November and December still.
We still see your PowerPoint.
Oh, just kidding. I am frighteningly bad at technology tonight. I apologize. This is not my normal, right? Not my normal. Okay. Whew. All right. So we've got, I'll go back to the top. Haha.
We still see your PowerPoint.
No.
Sorry.
Wait, it
You were
says
so excited. You were so ready, but it's still there.
now.
There it is. Yes, better. Yes.
Can I just facepalm? This is a very, very human webinar. This is not my normal, but you know what? I'm owning it. See, guys, humans. Okay. All right. So, and you know what my brain just told me? My brain told me, you'll decide if you're going to beat yourself up for this later. It's kind of a funny thought, but I'm going to decide no. I got better things to think about, like how to check my technology next time. Oh, I'll do an autopsy on this. I'm going to call Angela tomorrow or this weekend, and we can talk about how to make sure the things that went wrong go better next time. Problem solved. There we go. Not to guarantee that I won't mess up again because it's kind of my brand, but here we are. Okay, darling. So when you look at the October webinar resources, you've got two things. The worksheet is what you can write on right away. The PDF, the reference pages are ideas to guide you through the steps that you learned tonight. So if you want to print them out and write on them, do it. They're just kind of small boxes, which is why you have the worksheet too. Okay. So I'll check the chat and make sure that this is good. Oh, awesome, Meg. Yay. Okay. And then I want to show you what each looks like. So here's the worksheet. Am I sharing the worksheet now?
Yes.
Yay. Okay. Now I have to double check. And this is where, you know what, when you do your grade autopsy and you look through and you find what you're missing, this is the plan part of it. So, okay, I have a bunch of things to catch up on. And now I'm going to decide where they go. And then here's how you decide where they go. And I'll tell you what to do with them. So you do, if it's really easy, if it's low effort or high effort, you start thinking about it on that spectrum. And then you think about how much it helps your grade or not so much. So the value to you. So let's say you've got a worksheet that's almost done. You just have one more problem and then you turn it in and it's worth like 100 points. That is low effort, high value. That goes in your quick wins. Do these right away. Let's say you brain dumped and there's like a history project that some of the kids really liked, but you hated. And it's going to take, you estimate, like 3 hours, but somehow it's only worth 10 points. That would be low value, lots of work. That might go on your not happening list. 10 points. Are you willing to part with 10 points to get 3 hours back and have some time to do things that actually impact your grade? All right, bring it on. So you can play with this and decide where things go for you. Again, there's no right or wrong way to do it. The idea is you get everything all in one place so it stops floating around and stressing you out. And then you put it in the boxes to help you decide where you put your effort. And you start over here with the quick wins because it's the easiest and the most valuable. And then you can choose if you want to go to the busy work to kind of as a warm up. So things like Delta Math or some of the programs like Freckle or things like that that are kind of online programs that the points add up, but it's not really heavily requiring your mental effort. That could be something you use as a warm up. And then in this box is your stuff that you might need help with. It's worth a lot of points, but it's also kind of tricky. And those are the things that you might say, like ask your grown up or a teacher at school or a friend, like, can you partner up with me? This might be hard. So that is the worksheet that you'll have. And then the reference page, like I said, it's kind of small boxes, so you don't have to worry about getting it written. This could be something that guides your thinking and you can draw it out or talk it out, whatever. Again, these aren't worksheets like that you have to turn into someone. These are thinking tools. They're like maps for your experience. So same idea with a brain dump up here, but this time you're watching what you're thinking about your grades. Remember I told you you don't have to memorize the questions? That's because they're right here. And again, it's not judging questions. It's not thinking about like, why was I so bad at history or why did I fail this? Like nobody has time for that. You're doing your best. We're all functioning from that like understanding. Let's move on. Let's see where we can like level up in this game of school. This is more detailed of that same boxes for you to know where to put things. And then there's a spot right here for your plan. So you can think about how am I going to move forward? What am I going to keep doing? What do I want to do differently? And then there's some tools for making a plan to get caught up if that's your goal. And by the way, the lovely and talented Carrie Renda is the one who designed these pages with my very sketched out Google Doc. So thank you, Carrie. And if anybody wants her email for kind of this level of support in like design and stuff, she's very good. Okay, so those are the resources that you have up here. We will also post the YouTube link up here as well, so you have that. And now I'm going to ask you, what are you wondering? What can I help you kind of problem solve through? This is the part where we stare at you. So here's a hot tip that's sort of related. When I was teaching, if I needed to give directions or like kind of like a behavior correction, but like I love my chillins. Like they can't fall out of line, but you also don't want to take middle schoolers head on because hello, middle school. So I would sing it. So I would just be like, keep your hands to yourself. And they'd be like, ugh. And they'd be so freaked out that I'm not a great singer. Or sometimes it might come with a little dance that they would be like, okay, okay, stop now. So if you're raising a middle school human, sing it.
Start singing to them.
It's effective.
Might actually get a smirk or something too from that, right?
Oh,
Hopefully.
totally. And then they're like, you really think about, is it worth it to act like a turkey in this class? Because hello, she's gonna dance. If their phones ring, I would go dance to the ringtone because you're supposed to have it off. So you're gonna get the most dorky dance out of me. And see, you don't have to be a jerk to get what you need. All right. I really appreciate the comments and I'm open for questions. I want to also offer you that as with any strategy, this is going to take time. So doing a great autopsy at first, if it's too emotional, start with something that's a little bit more neutral and then kind of lean into the more difficult stuff. But with any strategy, you can expect that it's going to take practice to get good at. And there are a couple ways to make it stick and work faster, and they're up here. So make it avoidable and obvious. So that might be in the terms of great autopsy, that might be like scheduling it and maybe you make fun food and find a spooky soundtrack or put it on the calendar and then say, okay, we're going to ice cream and we're going to do this. Or I'm going to take you to Starbucks. We're going to commandeer a table and we're going to figure this out. Like it doesn't have to be this sit down, you're in trouble kind of situation. It can feel fun. Okay. And once you commit to that schedule, put on some reminders. Put it in the schedule that maybe every 2 or 3 weeks you check out a grade and see what you learn about you from that process. I don't imagine that this would get boring because you're not going to do it every single day. So the reboots aren't super applicable. But the part about brain stealers, hello, emotions are going to be big brain stealers in this situation. So be prepared for the feels and keep going. And I would also say be prepared by printing because what often happens when you start to do a great autopsy is you'll look at the list and get so overwhelmed that you'll start working on something that's missing. So be prepared to recognize like, oh, my brain wants to get started, but I can't. That's not my job right now. My job is to look, find patterns and insights. We always end with a plan and a promise. So, what will using this strategy look like in your life this week, this weekend? Again, not a punishment, an opportunity, but make sure you take it from knowing it to doing it by writing it down, by texting it to your best friend. Remind me about great autopsies. I'll tell you tomorrow. Um, to which I don't have to text because she's right here. She knows about it. um, what else could you do? Put it in your schedule for tomorrow, email yourself, whatever it is, keep it front and center so that you sleep on it tonight and you make action tomorrow.
And then Sarah, since you're talking about, planning, right?
Yeah.
So one of the participants wrote, we're still struggling to use a daily agenda and even getting some pushback from using one from the school. Can you explain? And they want, because I shared the article that you had written, but they want, like,
Thanks.
when you speak to the students, right? Can you explain at a student level how an agenda can support the autopsy process to kids? Because it would be a helpful tool.
Yeah, absolutely. Um, and I can tease out that probably the agenda isn't being used as deeply as you would like because it's such an executive function heavy ask of students. So when we see students not using their planners, which by the way was great timing, yeah, because my Edutopia article just came out on this. But when we see them not using it, it's because they haven't recognized its utility. So what usually happens is we pass our kids a planner and we're like, yo, use this. And they're like, yeah, cool. And some of the kids are like, oh my gosh, get me some markers. This is the funnest thing ever. And other kids are like, I'm going to hide this in my closet, or it might just form the bottom of my backpack for the semester. I don't know. And it's not a character flaw. It's because they don't recognize that that's like a very powerful tool. So I would say to our kids who are watching who are like, oh, that's extra work. Here's the deal. Planners help you capture what you need to do so that it doesn't float out of your brain. Because every time something floats out, it either becomes immediately lost points, like you just gave away the points, or it becomes work for tomorrow you, and that becomes very stressful. So if you can capture, kind of like collecting Pokemon, if you can capture your work and have it somewhere that won't be forgotten because it's outside of your brain, that means you have a chance to work on it while it's still, you still remember the topic. And before it's had a chance to like get really, really big with lots of other things. But if you don't know how to use a planner, getting started with a planner is super hard. So some people call it an agenda or a planner, by the way. Those are the same things, or like a calendar. Some schools want you to put it online. The idea is you have a work management system. And so when you're learning to use it, sometimes it's fun to actually use it for fun stuff first. So if you wanted to kind of test run what a planner could be like, maybe you put down all your family's birthdays, or maybe you use it to plan something fun for Halloween and you start writing out, okay, if I wanted to trick or treat and leave the house at 6, okay, I'm going to backwards plan. Maybe I want to have my costume on by 5:45 just in case. And maybe that means I need to start getting ready at about 5 o'clock. Do you see what I mean? So you can start using planners not for school at first if it's overwhelming to learn the process. Okay, so those are two ideas. And Meg, you're welcome to email me as well for more. But um, I would say again, function from the assumption that school matters. And if you're noticing like a tool's not being used the way you think it should or not fully, assume best intent, assume your kid is giving it their all and they just are missing either why the tool's pretty helpful or how to use the tool. And then if you want reminders of things coming up, and I think I sent my article to my newsletter just a couple days ago. Ooh, I have a TAD talk coming up, which is Talk About ADD. It's like a spinoff of TED Talks on November 3rd, all kinds of stuff. So I tend to send goodies and resources and um, collaborations with people way, way smarter than I am. I send those out. Good point. I don't know, Meg, if you saw it, Angela also added if the teacher's not modeling using the agenda, it's just an extra thing. Like oftentimes teachers say you should, and then they don't use it themselves. So that's another thing as well. Well, I super appreciate everyone being here. I hope that your grade autopsies go super well. And if they don't, we can embrace that too, right? Just like this webinar was like probably the bumpiest one I've ever done. And you know what? That's all right. We're going to do an autopsy on it and figure out how to make sure I have captions next time. You know what? Actually, I'm going to use a brain dump as soon as we hang up to make sure that I capture everything that I want to make better next time so that I don't forget, because I know my brain's pretty full. Well, thank you all for being here. I'll hang for just a sec if there's any more questions. Thanks, Meg. Yeah, it's